Yeah, we at Proudify we get a lot of people coming in who suspect that CMMC applies to them. Sometimes they don't even know for sure, but they suspect. And the common question that we get from most of them is, so where do I start? So for you, knowing this world, like if somebody's coming to you and saying, "All right, I gotta go do CMMC," like what is step number one?
So if I have to, step number one for someone coming to me is like, we think we need CMMC is going to be the first question is going to be, why do you think it? I was like, well, our contracts. Okay, well then let me look at the contracts. What are do you have the 7012 clause? Do you have the 7019, the 7020, 7021 clauses? What is the information that the government is you are actually receiving from the DoD? Or um, and then what information are you creating, sending back to the DoD? Right? Those are good questions
Mm,
because that's, just as Kenny said, and data flow is key. You have to know the data you're coming in, the data you're creating on behalf of the government, and data you're sending back, whether it's physical, paper, digital, something you created. We need to understand what that is. A lot of times we'll find out, like, oh, we get contract information. Oh, so you're not really talking about CUI, you're talking about federal contract information. That doesn't have to have a CMC level 2 certification. And then we see the, oh, thank God, I don't have to deal with this, right? There's that. Or it could be, a lot of times we see is we think we need CUI. Okay, this CUI I'm receiving is all done by contract through this IT system we have. It's like, oh, okay. So does it transfer or does it store or transmit or process anywhere else beyond this system? No. Oh, and and this is what we sold as a service to the government. So we have a ATO from this agency for this. Oh, well then you don't need CMC because the CUI is already in an authorized system. Because that's the thing too is, and um, there is, I don't know if there's any debate, but I've always made sure people understood, if your system has an ATO, an authority to operate from a government agency, or more specifically in this case for CMC from the DoD, that means it's not a non-federal system. It is a federal system because it's been authorized and it's operating on behalf of a DoD agency or a DoD organization. Where CMC comes in, and I want to make sure everyone understands, CMC still applies, but it only applies if that CUI goes beyond the boundary of that system that has an ATO. It's everything around it. Everything in that scope
interesting.
is out of scope for CMC because it's already ATO'd. It's in a federal system.
Yeah, that's
Those are the
interesting.
things I ask.
Hmm.
Yeah, you gave a talk about this at one of the CMMC events. It was really good. A lot of times people think that they need CMMC or they think that they should be focused on it, but really they actually need to be thinking about FedRAMP. And so tell us a little bit about that then. So you kind of talked about it, ATO, right? Because for example, Paramify is a cloud service provider, and I found out about CMMC because like I was like brand new and I was this like little contractor doing stuff for people. And then I found this documentation that said, oh yeah, CMMC applies to contractors that are like these non-federal areas. And so I kind of just like stupidly started looking at the controls and started implementing them. And I'm like, these look like FedRAMP controls. And ultimately, I learned pretty quick, oh yeah, it's FedRAMP for us, or we need to host on-prem in federal systems. So I don't know. Talk a little bit about that. It's because
So
it gets people.
yeah, that opens up a whole nother can of worms. But really, what FedRAMP
Let's
is,
open
people
it.
hear.
Open it up.
Okay, so people hear about FedRAMP. They'll hear about RMF or FISMA, and I'm throwing out these acronyms, but they're all interrelated. Trust me. So let me start off with basic and assume level set the knowledge, right? So FISMA is the Federal Information Security Modernization Act of 2022, I believe. It originally came out in 2002, and at that time it was the Federal Information Security Management Act. Pretty much what FISMA, from an overall layman's term, says: federal government, every agency in the federal government must have a way to formally review IT systems and approve them for use by the government, right? So it just implemented a formal review for cybersecurity purposes. We authorize these systems to operate on behalf, and it's reportable. It's a law, right? Um, what RMF is the risk management framework. And that's kind of where you talk about the 153 controls. The risk management framework is what NIST created of like agencies. Here's a framework to do that FISMA requirement of formally reviewing systems and determining baseline controls and all of that stuff. So that's what risk management framework is. And it leverages the 853 controls as how to do that thing when you get into the specifics. Now, what FedRAMP is a cloud-specific, tailored version of RMF to meet the FISMA requirements for cloud systems. So that's where FedRAMP comes in. And the big thing with FedRAMP or with RMF is it was tailored to every agency that used it. Like Department of State had their own FISMA RMF program. DOD had their own. Department of Energy, Department of Education, they all had their own version of it. They're all like 90% similar, but they were all sufficient enough, different enough that no one agency would accept the word of another agency, right? And that's what would be called reciprocity. What FedRAMP did is create a standard across all federal government for cloud because they recognize the benefits of and the uniqueness of cloud of what it does to say, here's a common control baseline threshold that if a company or cloud service provider meets it, it is acceptable to be used for an ATO decision by every agency without going through a assessment for Department of Education, assessment for DOD, assessment for Department of State. So it was a way to streamline it and provide a common framework that everyone can abide by and has agreed to. That's also part of the reason why it's so difficult, right? Because the more general you make something, the more documentation explanation you need behind it. And that's kind of what makes FedRAMP so painful.
Yeah.
Because having to meet all these different imperatives from different agencies because they all have a different way of how they think about things.